Hey folks, I know I'm just an ordinary guy telling stories, but please leave a like and subscribe before we start. Let's enjoy today's story. Before I dive into today's story, I want to say a disclaimer. The content presented here is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. The photo sat at the bottom of a battered shoebox, half swallowed by a stack of ticket stubs and a dented baseball card. My mother had handed it to me without a word. The weekend, I cleared out her attic. I thought it would be harmless, a flash of nostalgia, a laugh about bad haircuts, maybe a grainy sunset would remind me of summer. Instead, when I turned it over in the attic light and caught that upper window in the frame, something cold slid under my ribs and stayed. The house in the picture was mine, exactly as it had been when I was a child. The porch crooked into many winters, the gutter hanging like a loose eyelid, the swing with one bare chain. In the upstairs bedroom window, small and blurred by old paper and dust, was a figure. At first I thought it was a trick of exposure, a smudge or a ghost of light, but the posture, the left shoulder slightly higher, the tilt of the head toward the street, was unnervingly specific. It looked as if someone had paused mid-gesture, frozen half in a temporal contemplation. I brought the photo to my apartment and scanned it on a whim, more out of habit than belief. Later that day, as a test and because the world of pixels feels safer than memories, I drove to the house where I grew up. The building looked smaller in person, like most childhood things do. Paint peeled in ways I'd never noticed. As a KID, I set my camera on a tripod on the exact stretch of sidewalk I remembered from the old shot. Measured the distance by eye and tried to match the angle. The sun was lower, the light thinner, but that didn't matter. I framed the upstairs square and snapped several photos in quick succession, the shutter clicking like a nervous heart. Back at my desk, I put the 3 images side by side, the old print my modern photo and a zoomed crop. The upstairs window is the same curve of curtain, the same crack in the window pane, the same slanting gutter. But in the new photo, there was a figure again, not as tiny, not as indistinct. The outline had meat on its bones. The shoulders filled the frame differently. There was something about the stance that matched the old print with a bone-deep accuracy, as if a single person had occupied both positions years apart. My first instinct was to call it a coincidence. Maybe the same neighbor lived there for decades. Maybe someone was practicing a pose. Maybe my memory was making patterns when none existed. But the more I stared, the less comfortable I felt. The old figure looked younger, smaller, childish, almost, while the modern silhouette carried the slump of age that matched the way I now carried my own shoulders. That particular slump was a private thing, the way my neck had started to dip forward from a decade of hunching over screens and steering wheels. Seeing it there, reproduced in a photograph of someone who might have been watching my life from a window for 30 years, made the room tilt a dot. I slept poorly. In the morning, I called my mother and asked when the old photo was taken. She fumbled with the date. Birthday parties, a neighbor. She couldn't remember specifics. Maybe late summer of '92, she guessed. My heart thudded anyway because the arithmetic fit. If the figure had been a child then, and if it had aged alongside me, it would be my age now, or a year older, or younger. It would have watched the seasons, births, funerals, nothing. The idea lodged itself like a splinter. For a few days, I showed the prints only to myself. I zoomed, compared pixels, adjusted brightness, Even printed a blown-up version to tape to my wall like a prophet's map. I talked to friends, half laughing that I had discovered a haunted hobby. Maybe it's a neighbor, one said. Maybe it's a trick of light, another offered. Their rationalities were decent reflectors, but they didn't sit right with me. Curiosity hardened into what might be more honest when I'm alone, an itch that wants to be scratched. I set my camera to take a time lapse of the house, planning to leave it on the sidewalk for a day, return with coffee, and see if anyone stepped into the upstairs window. I wanted a human explanation and was determined to catch it, raw and dull, in real time. I left the tripod, drove away, sat in my car with the engine off for an hour while the city buzzed normally, and then returned to find the memory card blinking as if pleased. There was nothing in the footage but the occasional passing car and a pigeon making 3 significant landings on the gutter. No one came to the window while I waited. That night, alone in my apartment amid stacks of old photos, I felt watched in a way that had nothing to do with superstition and everything to do with pattern. Human brains build stories out of repetition. I knew the steps of my own life like a floor plan. I also know that when you force observation on something long enough, you're invited to answer back. Maybe that's what I did lean to, consistently, into the thin seam of strangeness in the hopes of pulling a thread. It answered. It began with a small, almost polite motion, a hand raised in the window of the house photo. Not a wave in a sloppy, performative way a neighbor might gesture at a friend. It was slow, deliberate, as if the person on the other side had practiced the motion for years and kept it in reserve. I woke from a half-sleep at 3 because my phone buzzed. It was an image sent from an unknown number. My house, the upstairs window bright with a domestic light that implied someone at home. The file itself was sharp, unnervingly so, and in the window, the raised hand was unmistakable. I checked. Sender, unknown. The metadata said the image had been taken moments before it arrived on my phone, not a recycled image. Not repost. The number traced back shockingly to my own phone, stared at the screen until the digits melted. The hand in the window seemed to float there in my memory, like a held breath. I called my mother. Did you send this? I asked. No, she said. Who would? Why would she get a picture of the house? So I drove to the place in the dead hours with my camera and the foolish hope of catching someone placing themselves there to frighten me. Maybe I'd stumble upon pranksters with a tripod and a talentless sense of humor. Maybe I'd find a relative who'd been taking the pictures for some reason and decided to mess with me instead. Under a sky the color of bruised metal, I stood on the sidewalk with a flashlight and listened to the house breathe. The windows were dark in most rooms. When I reached the old tree on the curb, the smell of crushed leaves and wet earth rose up like an old song. I stood there and watched the upstairs window. After a long stretch of nothing, the light went on, not the whole room, a single square of illumination in the pane where a curtain had been slightly parted, the kind of gold that says someone has been there for a while. Then a silhouette raised a hand. The motion was calm, intimate, as if greeting an old, familiar face. I felt the world tilt again. The hair on my forearms prickled. I wanted to snap a photo, to record proof, to put a physical anchor on what I saw. My hands fumbled for the camera, and the thought interrupted the reflex. What if the camera changed a thing? What if documenting it was a way to invite it closer? For reasons I can't entirely claim as bravery or sense, I stayed still and watched. The figure's hand came down slowly, as if to rest against the glass dot. At that moment, neighbor's porch light. Clicked on 2 houses down, and the dog started barking. The figure at the window did something I remember as clearly as the sound of my own name. It turned its head, not toward the street, but toward the house itself, as if listening to something inside. Then, and this was the part that unstitched me, the head tilted in a small, human gesture of recognition, and the lips shaped a word I couldn't hear from my distance, but that I knew from a younger life. It was the nickname my sister used to call me when we were small and reckless, and secret keeping felt like a religion. I stumbled back into my car, more aware of the cold than I had been a minute before. I drove home and replayed every moment like a haunted slideshow. The image on my phone repeated itself. A person, a wave, couriered to me via my own number. I had never set up anything that would send files to myself as the explanation in favor of pranksterism narrowed into the shape of impossibility. In the days that followed, phenomena multiplied its small cruelties. A reflection in a spoon at breakfast would be a head-shaped blur where my face should be. At the laundromat, caught a glimpse of myself in the chrome dryer door, and the glass took me out of the frame. The outline of my head remained. Eerie silhouette, but the features, the eyes, the mouth were gone, as if removed by a gentle eraser. Once, brushing my teeth, I watched a mirror fog, and in the condensation, the faint shadow of the upstairs window appear. A square within a square. I tried to make it rational. Exhaustion, a migraine aura. The brain's penchant for pareidolia. I saw doctors for tests that came back clean. I spoke to a psychologist who nodded compassionately and suggested grounding techniques and limiting caffeine. I started keeping a journal of occurrences, clinical and thin as a ledger, so I would not lose a thread. Something worse happened. Something worse happened. It was subtle at first. A voicemail from myself with only static on the line. A text that had no sender but contained old family photos I had never posted online. Then, a package arrived at my doorstep, a framed enlargement of the old attic photo with a small sticky note on the back that read, in a looping, small hand, "I've been here." There was no return address. The frame had damp spots like someone had cried on it and then wrapped it hastily to send. That night, I set up cameras in my own bedroom, pointed at the mirror. I slept fitfully and woke often at tiny noises. 3:12 a.m. My phone chimed with a new file. My camera had recorded a slow, certain movement in the mirror, the square of the upstairs window appearing in the glass, and within it, a hand lifting in a small, very familiar wave. I watched the footage until my eyes burned. I sat with it on a loop for hours, waiting for some resolution, some explanation. None came. When morning arrived, my mirror reflected me as if nothing had happened. A week later, I left for work. In a rush of habit, checked the spoon by the sink and the mirror in the hallway. The mirror looked correct, a face with an unremarkable expression. I unlocked my car, drove, and at a red light, I glanced up into the reflection of the rearview mirror. My face was there. Relief, tiny and palpable, started to ease the knot in my chest. Then my phone buzzed. It was a notification from an anonymous social account. A live photo had been uploaded and tagged. When I tapped it, my stomach dropped. The clip showed the upstairs window of my childhood house, sunlight pouring. Then, as if on cue, a hand lifted and gave a small, private wave. The caption was a single line, "See you soon." I shut the phone down, hands trembling. For the first time in days, I cried. Not for myself, exactly. Not only for that, but for the idea. That something I thought immutable, like the person I saw when I blinked, could be borrowed or borrowed back without asking. There was a kind of theft in it that made fear look like loss. I don't know what the figure is, and I have stopped pretending to have the capacity to reduce it to legend or logic. It may be a thing that takes up residence in glass, a pattern that chooses faces and follows them as if matching a code. It may be a memory with teeth. It may be an echo of every child who ever leaned to look at the street and never left. Oh, I know it's this sequence of facts. It started as a figure in a dusty photo. It aged in images with me. It waved once last night and this morning. For a breath, my reflection did not respond. There are practicalities left. I changed locks and moved some mirrors. I stopped leaving the old shoebox on the shelf. Sometimes, when the apartment is full of ordinary noises and the kettle hisses and my neighbor vacuums, I will stand before a pane of glass and watch my own face, as if by watching, I am somehow keeping the world in balance. Mostly, I wait. When my phone vibrates with an incoming image that originates from nowhere, I don't look for the last time. I look to see if the hand is raised. If you go through old albums and find a photo of a house where someone stands behind a window, maybe don't dismiss it. Maybe don't share it as a cute find. Put it in a drawer if the figure ever lifts a hand. Give it something to hold on to. A name, a piece of kindness. Anything that says you see them as a person rather than a picture. It might not help. It might be the only thing that matters. Last night, it waved again. This morning, for a moment before the sun fully woke the city, my reflection looked back at me properly. I breathed like a person who has been allowed to keep a small mercy. Then, as I reached for my coffee, the phone buzzed on the counter with an image from the house, the upstairs window, the curtain slightly parted, and a hand raised in that patient, practiced greeting. I haven't opened it yet.